So here's how I plan to stay lean and aesthetic forever naturally, and you can too.
Now, since I've started my fitness journey, I've always been more drawn to a lean and conventionally aesthetic physique. That's why across the 10 years I've been lifting now, I've never bulked. And if you followed my fitness journey, you see that I teeter between 10 to 12% body fat year round. And really, I'm not the only person that does this. If you look at other popular examples, David Lade, Ziz, they both have stayed at a relatively low body fat percentage and are deemed very, very aesthetic. So in this video, I'm gonna explain how I plan to stay 10 to 12% body fat for the rest of my life and how you can too. Let's get into it. Now, the first thing I should do is define what I mean by a lean physique, because it does depend on the person. I wanna make it clear, I'm not talking about being stage shredded, sub 10% body fat, as even for someone like me, that's probably gonna be impossible to maintain long term, and it's probably not gonna be healthy. I take that back, it's definitely not gonna be healthy. To me, a lean physique is at least sub 15% body fat, but ideally closer to the 10 to 12% body fat range. And ultimately, this is where it might depend from individual to individual, because naturally we all have different body fat set points. I'm lucky to be naturally leaner as is, so maintaining 12% body fat is easier than, let's say, someone who's naturally has a higher body fat set point. And it's not that someone that naturally has a higher body fat set point can't get to 10% body fat. What I mean is long term, mentally and physically, their body just does not want to maintain 10% body fat, and they're just not going to feel overall good, healthy, or high energy. And that last part is super crucial to understand, because ultimately I don't plan to suffer and have a grueling time trying to maintain that 10 to 12% body fat. No, I'm still going to be living my life like normal. That's the key thing to remember here. I'm going for longevity. I'm not trying to get as shredded as possible, and I'm trying to stay within a level of leanness where my body's not going to reject it and hate itself. So for me, I believe it to be around 10% body fat, but for you, it might be slightly higher or maybe slightly lower. But regardless, if you plan to do the same thing or you're currently in the process of leaning down, here are the 5 things I plan to do to achieve this. Now, point number 1 is going to be pretty obvious, and that is work out consistently for the rest of my life. This ultimately means doing whatever I can to avoid injuries and not being short-term minded when I'm working out. For example, one of the big reasons I decided to never take performance-enhancing drugs like steroids and all that kind of stuff is because if my goal is to build a nice physique and maintain that through the rest of my life, well, I'd be reliant on taking the PED for the rest of my life, which is not only expensive, but also likely will have a good chance that it will shorten my life. Now, I want to make it clear, at this moment in time, my goal is to continue to build muscle while still maintaining my relatively lean body fat percentage. But inevitably, 20, 30 years later, my goal will likely shift to merely maintaining my muscle mass as I age. But how does working out consistently help me stay lean? Well, while the type of training I do, which is this more bodybuilding, hypertrophy focused type of weightlifting, honestly doesn't really burn that many calories. What it does, of course, is help me build muscle. And the more muscle mass I have, the more calories I naturally burn just by existing. My basal metabolic rate increases. And while this additional calories burned from having more muscle isn't going to be huge, it is in a way passive. Similar to investing in the stock market versus working an hourly wage. By merely having more muscle mass, I probably burn conservatively 200 calories more per day just by existing than I did 10 years ago when I first started. But more importantly, working out consistently is mentally the foundation of my healthy habits. And because I lift in the morning, I can't really think of a better way to remind myself to continue to follow my healthy habits. And a side note, if you're currently struggling with being consistent in the gym, one thing that may help is honestly just feeling confident and looking good in the gym. Now, I pretty much wear Able every day because not only is it comfortable, but in my opinion, they make high quality gym wear that honestly just feels and looks good, especially the shorts. I know sometimes it's hard to find shorts that actually fit well, especially if you're a smaller guy, but I'm gonna tell you the core shorts, whether it be 5 or 7 inseams in any color, probably the best fitting shorts I own. And if you're curious, I am a size extra small in the shorts, and I have a 28-inch waist, and my tops are usually medium. Now, if you're gonna check them out, make sure to use code PATH to get an additional 10% off, and I appreciate the support in advance. Now, habit number 2, prioritize movement. And for that, let's go on a walk. All right, so currently on my walk out here in LA. Now, I mentioned earlier how working out in the gym isn't directly gonna result in me burning like a whole lot more calories, especially if you're doing, 8 reps, then rest for 2 minutes, then another 8 reps. Instead, what will consistently burn more calories is consistent movement throughout the day. You see, if you think about what encompasses the total amount of calories you burn in a day, that is your total daily energy expenditure, abbreviated as TDEE. On average, majority of it's gonna be your basal metabolic rate or your BMR. This is like the baseline amount of calories you naturally burn without even doing anything. And then we have our exercise activity, abbreviated as EAT, exercise activity thermogenesis. This is the amount of calories we burn by directly exercising, doing cardio, that sort of thing. But then there's also our non-exercise activity, abbreviated as non-exercise EAT. Now this one's interesting. This is the amount of calories you burn by all the activity you do that's not considered exercise. So you walking, you fidgeting around, you pacing back and forth before an interview, whatever it is. Pretty much all the non-exercise movement you do, including me speaking and move my jaw right now. Because at the end of the day, the way we burn more calories than just our BMR is simply just by moving. And in my opinion, is this third one, this non-exercise activity that you can really improve that will result in you burning a lot more calories on a daily basis without you feeling like you're doing extra exercise. I think mentally that is the important part. It doesn't really require that much willpower to do. Now that we're back, habit number 3 is to prioritize lean sources of protein over fattier ones. So if the first 2 habits were focused on how to burn more calories, these next few ones are focused on how to eat less calories. After all, you can't really rely on pure offense, you gotta have some good defense as well, you know? I mean, after all, it is more efficient and less physical work to eat 100 less calories than to burn 100 additional calories, especially if you're a busy person. Now, the whole goal of eating less calories isn't to be in a crazy deficit. No, in reality, it's more to eat around your maintenance and to ensure that you're not eating in a crazy surplus and gaining a lot more fat. Now, one of the best ways to try to control your calories better is to focus on eating more lean sources of protein. Now, there's many reasons why you want to eat protein. One of which is because protein has a satiating effect on your hunger. Meaning in general, 100 calories of protein is gonna make you more full than 100 calories of carbs or 100 calories of fats. But on top of that, protein has a higher thermic effect of food. So bringing back the whiteboard and looking at all the different ways we actually burn calories throughout the day, this fourth one is the thermic effect of food, abbreviated as TEF. The thermic effect of food is essentially the calories used by your body to actually digest that food. And it just so happens that out of all the different macronutrients, protein has the highest thermic effect, which means the more protein you consume in your diet, technically speaking, the more calories you're gonna be burning, at least compared to carbs and fats. However, not all sources of protein are created equal. You need to learn to distinguish the difference between leaner sources of protein and fattier sources of protein. And I promise you take your time doing this because a lot of people get this wrong. A lot of people assume that automatically any dish that has a lot of animal protein is gonna have a lot of protein, but that's not always the case. For example, there's a lot of Asian dishes that uses pork belly as the main source of protein. But if you look at the macros of pork belly, it's pretty atrocious compared to chicken thigh, which is used in many different dishes, one of which being my favorite, common guy, Thai chicken rice. And looking at the macros for chicken thigh, you see it's a night and day difference. That is, the ratio between fats and protein is much more favorable. And if you're curious about examples of lean sources of protein, you can check out my full day of eating in Singapore video, or you can check out my video I made where I basically found the healthiest dishes at the most common fast food places. I think between those two, you'll get a good understanding of what lean sources of protein are. But on top of that, a super convenient way to get 20-ish grams of protein without any carbs and fats is by taking a high quality supplement such as MyProtein's Clear Whey Protein. Now here I got the lemonade flavor, and I promise you this is probably the easiest 20 grams of protein you'll ever have in your life. You mix it with water, it is very light, but then after you're drinking, you're like, actually I'm pretty full. You get that satiating effect like I mentioned earlier. I've been taking MyProtein for years, and if you're gonna cop this, definitely use code TYLERPath for an additional 40-ish% off is my assumption. Regardless, it is quite a deal that you're gonna get. And of course, using that code is much appreciated. It supports my continued delivery of these videos. A little scene change for habit number 4, and that is substitute some of your carbs for vegetables and fruit. Now, I know it's kind of ironic for me to say that since I'm drinking matcha tonic, but that's kind of close to vegetables, right? Now, to make it super clear, I'm not anti-carb, but in my opinion, if you want to stay lean long term, swapping some of your carb-heavy foods for fruits, vegetables, probably one of the easiest ways to keep the calories lower in your overall meal. Because think about it, especially for like Asian dishes, pretty easy just to half the amount of rice you're normally eating, and then you just fill that up with bok choy, salad mix, could even be a bag of like frozen broccoli from Aldi. And the reason why it's so effective is generally vegetables and fruit, they're all relatively low in calorie as well as being high in fiber. In fact, they're probably among the most voluminous food groups out there. And ultimately this makes some pretty good choices when you're trying to reduce the amount of total calories you're eating in a day. On top of that, because food choices are a zero-sum game, meaning if you're gonna be prioritizing fruits and vegetables in your diet first, chances are you're probably gonna get more full and overall eat less calorically dense foods. So I'm confident that rounding it out with the last habit, if you prioritize lean sources of protein, vegetables, and fruits, I guarantee you're gonna be eating less calories than you currently are right now. That is something I'm very confident about. But if you're looking for more personal guidance on how to get and actually stay lean in a sustainable way, then I highly recommend you apply my exclusive one-on-one fitness coaching program where I pretty much do just that. The whole goal is to pretty much take the guesswork out of getting to your fitness goals for you, both on the workout side as well as the nutrition side, so you can just focus on executing. And the goal is by the end of it, you're pretty much gonna be able to continue doing what you're doing without me being there. That's the hallmark of approaching things sustainably. So if that sounds sounds interesting to you, I recommend you check that out in the link in the description. Let's move on to the last habit. Now, the final habit that's gonna help me stay lean for the rest of my life is time-restricted eating. No, this is not how fast you can eat one meal like Matt Stomey. Time-restricted eating is simply restricting the time that you eat to a certain amount of hours in a day or a certain time of day. And then of course, fasting the rest. Now personally, I don't follow a specific window of time, which is why ultimately I don't call it intermittent fasting. But in general, I took this straight from Andrew Huberman. I simply try to not eat 2 hours before I sleep and 1 hour after I wake up. So depending on the time I sleep and wake up, ultimately impacts my eating window on the day, which is why it's not strictly intermittent fasting. But honestly, there's nothing magical about this. If anything, I do this more to improve my sleep quality. But generally speaking, the less hours you give in a day to allow yourself to eat, the less overall calories you're probably gonna eat. Especially if you're not ferociously hungry because you're like cutting super hard or you're well below your body fat set point. Again, the whole idea is I'm trying to make this so habitual that it doesn't really take much effort to do this. And that's pretty much how I plan to stay lean forever. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a like to support my page. Hit subscribe to level up your physique. And if you're trying to get better at building muscle, losing body fat, and anything related to fitness, definitely hit the bell notification, get these videos right to you as they come hot. See y'all. Peace.